So I just have a question. So I read the Quran and I was actually listening to someone talk about it as well too. And I just wanted to know your explanation. How would you justify Surah 434?
All right, well, I'm gonna have to look it up because I don't know it off the top of my head. Hold on.
Okay. And by the way, which version of the Quran do you read?
So there's, if you're looking at English, we recommend the Clear Quran translation is probably the best one.
The clear what Quran?
The Clear Quran.
The clear Quran. Okay. Let me search that one up then. Um
So, all right.
Okay, so I see the Sahih International. Is that okay? Is that version good or
That's a good one too, yeah. That's a
okay.
very good one too, yeah.
Okay, okay. So I'll go ahead. I guess you can read it and I'll follow along.
So you're talking about this verse where it says men are like the caretakers of women,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, can we read it together, I guess, and then you can explain it?
Sure. So the translation I'm using says, men are the caretakers of women, as men have been provisioned by Allah over women and tasked with supporting them financially. And righteous women are devout, obedient, and when alone, protective of what Allah has entrusted them with. And if you sense ill conduct from your women, advise them first. If they persist, do not share their bed. But if they still persist, then discipline them gently. But if they change their ways, do not be unjust to them. Surely Allah is Most High, the All-Great.
Okay. And so I guess my question is whenever reading these verses, because again, I'm reading the Sahih International version, which you said is a good version of the Quran. And so in mine it says, so righteous women are devoutly obedient, guarding in absence what Allah would have them guard, but those from whom ye fear arrogance, advise them, forsake them in bed, and strike them. And so I'm not even going to bring, I mean, I guess I could bring up the part that it says strike, but even before we even get to that part of the verse, I do see the part where it says, if you fear arrogance from your wives, that you can go ahead and forsake them in bed. So I'm just curious, like, what does that look like according to the Quran?
I'm going to say, I don't know if arrogance is the best way to describe it. I would say if they're disobedient, quote unquote, like, not necessarily towards you, but disobedient towards what they're supposed to do, like in terms of the
Oh, so is that a bad version of the Quran then?
No. I mean, so the issue is, the Quran itself is only in Arabic, right? And so when we talk about these English Qurans, these are human attempts at the translation of the meaning of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the Sahih International is actually translated by a woman, actually. Interestingly, it's a white convert that translated it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a good translation. I do trust that translation.
So do you not trust that part where it says that then? Where it says strike your wife?
No, no. So I want to clarify that as well. So the strike the wife is more kind of like a symbolic strike. Like you can't like beat her up, right? It's like you were to take like like if they say a miswak, which is kind of like a toothbrush in the Middle East, and you use that to symbolically, quote unquote, hit your wife with it. It doesn't mean like you beat them up or you send them to the hospital or something like that. That's totally not kosher, if I can use that word in a situation. But behave arrogantly might mean like they're arrogant towards what they're supposed to be doing. So I guess it works. It works the way arrogance would be like, not that they're being arrogant in general, but it's like they're being arrogant against their obligations or the way they act or their behavior towards like the law or to their religion or something like that.
Okay, I see I see your explanation. I'm just kind of confused because I'm looking at the Arabic word, right? And whenever you break it down, like the pronoun and the conjunction and the verb, we actually see when we break down the verb, it says to set forth, to strike. So I'm trying to read it within context, and that's why I'm calling you guys, because it's hard to believe like what I'm reading, because it does say to finally strike them, and I don't know how you could put that into context.
Yeah, so I would say daraba does mean the word hit or strike, but better word than strike. But I guess you would.
But regardless, it's still beating your wife, regardless of how
Right.
what words we use.
So I would say it would be, there should be, maybe you could think of it as parentheses gently, or in quotes gently, or something like that.
But it doesn't say that
Yeah,
though,
I mean,
you know. So that's why.
that's the way. Yeah.
No, I agree that like like if you look at Islamic scholarship, they might say that because like it's different interpretations and tafsirs and things like that. But I just find it interesting because whenever you actually look at the Quran for itself, forget everyone else, forget me, forget you, forget what some random imam or whatever religion has to say. Like just strictly looking at the Quran without our own individual interpretations, it does make it clear though, right? Like it does say to strike them, or if we look at the Arabic,
I get it.
You know,
I understand, and that's why in some countries like Afghanistan, it's taken more on a literal basis. I can understand what you're saying.
Okay. And so, I mean, to be honest, within context, I could only take it as a literal basis, and that's what I mean. And so, I feel like Muslims, like, you know, we should all be open more about this because I feel like it kind of does a disservice to Islam, and it's very disingenuous to kind of like act like it's not the case. Because in reality, when I read it within context, it does make it very clear that you can go ahead and strike your wife within the means that the Quran gives, right? Like obviously if she obeys you after 3 times, then you can strike her. But I just think like this whole like mainstream narrative to go ahead and go against the Quran is just completely disingenuous, and it changes the words of the Quran.
I think that's why you have to look at the explanation, right? The tafsirs about what does it mean that apply in this situation versus that apply in other situations in that regard. I would say. I don't think it's being disingenuous. I think it's trying to understand it in the context that we're supposed to understand it in.
No, yeah, I understand, like, again, but that's your interpretation. It doesn't say that in the Quran. It just says to strike. It doesn't say to lightly strike. It doesn't say metaphorically strike. It just says strike. And within that context, we can see it's physical. And that's what I'm saying. I understand there's different interpretations. However, the Quran at very plain value makes it clear to strike your wife after the 3rd time of being disobedience, right? It's like the 3rd step in the process. So I just don't understand why we can't just accept the real interpretation that the Quran is giving us.
Yeah, I mean that's the way you see it, and it's not my role to change in that regard.
Okay, and so I just have a question for you. So like, let's say, I mean, I know everyone practices Islam differently, but let's say I decide, you know, I want to go ahead and practice this against my wife. I don't feel like it, I mean, you can correct me if you have a different opinion, but I just don't feel like you should be able to correct me if I want to go ahead and do this. Do you agree with that? Like if I want to go ahead and strike my wife according to Surah 434, because it tells me this, do you think that I should be able to do that as a brother in the faith, or do you think I guess, how would you respond to that?
I think there's different things we need to answer in the situation. One of them would be the well-being of quote unquote your wife. If you're beating her to a pulp and she's being hospitalized, then obviously you've crossed all bounds and limits, in spite of what you may believe to be the truth, right? I mean that's a very unfair way to practice it, taking something and then practicing it the way you interpret it, and that being.
But it's not interpretation, others, right? Though. It's just it's the quite literal.
It is interpretation. I would say if you are someone who is a scholar of Islam and has studied the Arabic language, and then you have came to this conclusion, that is very different than someone who's reading a translation who is, you know, knowing Arabic at a basic level and saying, hey, this gives me permission to beat up my wife. That's a very different situation, very different scenario. If you are someone that is a scholar in their own right, has, you know, a master's degree in the linguistics of the Quran, then that would be a different person in their.
Okay, well, I don't have to be a scholar with some sort of doctorate or master's degree to understand Arabic, first of all. And second of all, when we do look at the Arabic, it does make it clear what it says in the Quranic Arabic, right? So you don't have to be some sort of.
I don't agree with you, and this is something where me and you.
So what do you believe it says then? Because I do see the word. What's the word that it's saying in the Arabic?
Yeah, it's daraba, right, which means to hit.
Okay.
But hit can mean different things, right? I mean, you're gonna jump and
no, but what's the definition of hit?
No, but you're gonna jump across and say, hey, I see it where it says also I'm supposed to kill non-Muslims wherever I see them, right?
That's not even what I was gonna. That's not what I was gonna bring up. I'm not bringing up other religions. I'm just talking about this specifically, this verse.
I'm not.
So I don't want you to jump to other verses. I'm just saying this verse specifically. Whenever you look at the word, it makes it. But it says to strike in the Quran. Do you not believe in the Quran from the Messenger of Allah?
I believe in the Quran. I believe the word is strike, but I have a different understanding of what strike is than what you have.
So whenever I go on Google, right, like if I search up strike definition, because this is like, I'm not lying to you. Like if you search up strike, it says to hit forcibly and deliberately with one's hands or a weapon or other implement. And I mean, I see this as a common practice from like Muslims that I know in like in Africa and the Middle East. It's very common. Maybe not so much in the Western world. It's widely accepted, but you know, in the Eastern world, it's a lot more accepted. And I think it's a mixture of culture, but also mainly religion because it's intertwined. So whenever you look at Islam, the way it's practiced in the Eastern world, it is absolutely acceptable. And I think that's because of the verse.
I think hit is a better translation than strike, to be honest.
Regardless if you say hit or strike, it doesn't denote how negative it is.
Yes, but that's where common sense comes into place. You can't hit your wife as hard as you want. You can't punch her in the face, right?
But the scholars say strike, though. I'm listening to the scholars. I understand, like, you and I aren't like these expert scholars. We're not, you know.
You can go, no. While we were talking, I typed in Daraba into Google Translate and translates to hit.
No, but the actual, yeah, so the better translation actually, because I'm on Quran.com, right? If you go on Quran.com, it translates to strike. But even if you were to translate it into, let's say, hit, it doesn't take away the negative connotation. It doesn't take away the fact that you could go ahead and beat, strike, or hit your wife.
I'm not going to agree with you, man. All right,
but that's what it says, though. But why is it where does it say it's metaphorical?
Because look, man. If you come to me as a you are not an Arabic. But
you're not either.
You are literally using Google Translate.
But you're not. I'm not using Google Translate. I'm not using Google Translate at all.
No, but what I'm saying is, you don't even know what the word daraba means in Arabic. Yes, it
means yes. Whenever you break it down, it means to strike, to set forth, right? So whenever you break it,
when people beat their kids for, I'm not saying that that's acceptable, but when people beat their kids, right, to teach them a lesson, right, they literally hit them, like, right?
Okay.
That is not the same, and there's there are different interpretations on what is acceptable culturally, right?
Right, but hitting a kid and hitting your wife are two totally different things, right? They're not the same. Do we agree with that?
What I'm saying is I agree with that, but what I am saying is you have different understandings of what it means to beat your kid depending on how you're saying it.
Not really, because, like, for example, hitting your kid, obviously you're not going to abuse them. But whenever you look at, for example, in Surah 434, it says to strike your wife. And so even if you do say hit your wife, no matter how much pressure you apply, but it doesn't matter how much pressure you apply to striking your wife, you're still striking her. Whereas a kid, there's limits to it. Whereas a wife, it's a no limit zone. You don't hit not even a little bit. So that's the issue that I have.
I think this is cultural. You're having cultural play.
It's not. It's religious. They can't be intertwined.
You can have political.
They can't be intertwined. Okay.
It can be intertwined, of course. I'm married. I have a wife. I've never hit her, right?
Okay.
The fact of the matter is, in my culture, it's generally not. It's not acceptable.
Okay.
Right?
That's fine if you don't
And so
specifically hit her, but that doesn't mean that the Quran does not say that. So the Quran itself, it says that you can go ahead and strike your wife. It says, and strike them in the original Arabic. And so regardless if you want to denote that and say hit, it doesn't change the fact that regardless if you're using the term strike or hit, they have the same meaning.
What I'm saying is if you hit your wife, quote unquote, softly or gently in a different culture, that's acceptable.
Right. So do we care what the culture says or do we care what Allah says?
Culture plays a huge role.
Okay, so now you're saying culture plays a huge role when I was just saying that and you said it doesn't. All right. So now that culture plays a huge role, whenever we look at this verse, and he hung up, guys. Look at this Abdul. He ran away, guys. He ran away. I got to go ahead and fold my laundry, guys. But, man, that was just too funny, guys. That was hilarious. This dude. Like, guys, if you guys literally look at my screen, whenever we look at this word right here, this word right here, it says, and finally strike them. It doesn't get any more clear than that. And no matter which version of the Quran you want to go ahead and read, guys, it literally says to go ahead and strike your wife. It doesn't get any more simple than that, guys. You can scourge them, you can hit them, you can beat them, you can strike them. It does not matter, guys. At the end of the day, it's still saying to strike, beat, hit your wife. That is absolutely satanic, and I rebuke that in the name of Jesus Christ. And guys, honestly, if you're in a marriage, with a Muslim, honestly, run away, guys. Y'all need Jesus Christ, man, because this is absolutely disgusting. But this is what Islam teaches. I mean, look at this, guys. I cannot make this up. No matter which version of the Quran that we read, it will say strike them. It will say scourge them, which is even worse. It will go ahead and say beat them. And by the way, the parentheses is scholarship opinion. It's not what it actually says in the original Arabic. Lightly is something added to appeal to the Western world and the Western audience, right? Reading the Quran. But when you look at the Sahih International, which, like he said himself, being a practicing Muslim, is the most reputable version of the Quran, he said that it's the most reputable and it was created by a woman, even at that. Right? And then even if you read that, it says to strike them with no light. It doesn't say parentheses lightly. It says to strike them. So it makes it very clear that Allah wants you to go ahead and beat your wife. That's what Allah wants because he's a pagan moon deity. Abdul, he wants you to go ahead and beat your wife because it's a sacrifice to Satan. Let me know what you guys think about this in the comments below. I thought talking to this Abdul was hilarious. He completely ran away. He hung up. He got so upset. But don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications, share it with someone that you believe will find this entertaining. Please go ahead and share this video and smash that like button. I hope you guys enjoy and God bless y'all. It was your boy Nate.